And also it makes you appreciate people's kindness much more. I mean, maybe I'm just trying to find positive things here, but yeah, negative experiences just give you a good contrast to the better ones. So
welcome to the Venture-Ette podcast, where women from all over the world share their stories of travel, moving abroad, and creating a new life for themselves, hoping to inspire you to live out your dreams by showing you how other women did it. I'm your host, Venture-Ette, Ashley.
Hello, and welcome to Venture-Ette podcast. I'm Ashley, and I am so excited for today's guest. She is someone who I've been admiring through Instagram for quite a while now, and not just because her photos are stunning, which they are, but she is just an amazing storyteller. I love seeing her journey and how she explains about the places that she goes to. And what even impresses me even more is the fact that she's just about to turn 24, but she's already been traveling for so many years and has been to countless countries. And so today I'm really excited for her to share with us as to how she's been able to create this life for herself at such a young age, as well as share as how it is traveling as a solo mixed race woman. As we all know, it's a time where possibly the biggest movement in history is happening right now, fighting against racism. And I think it's important to be well aware that this is something that is just not happening in the US, but around the world as well. So I am so pleased to welcome Andy.
hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. I really appreciate your sweet words and everything that you have said. I feel honored to be here and be able to speak about all of these topics with you because they're all things that I'm really passionate about, and being able to share it with more people is something that I obviously love doing since, as you know, I'm active on social media and try to do a lot of storytelling through my photography around the world.
Like I said, just following you, you do such an amazing job as to just talking about your journey, but also just kind of informing everyone about the places that you go to. It almost makes me feel like I'm there with you, which is honestly really nice. And especially in a time where right now traveling isn't so much of an option. I know you've been still quite active and exploring like more of Austria. So that it's honestly been like a great way to escape. But I just kind of, want to know is that has traveling been a part of your life from like a very young age when you were growing up?
More or less. I mean, coming from a very mixed family, my mother is from Austria and my dad is from Venezuela. I've always had this kind of understanding that the world is more than just one tiny place to be at. I grew up in a small village, but still I knew that there was kind of more out there. So I guess this seed was planted in my head, I guess you could say, very early on. And also I got to know Venezuela and got to know Austria since I was a kid. And ever since I turned 18 and was able to just travel by myself without, needing a parent's signature or something like that, I just went out to travel as much as I could.
Most people look forward to other things, but you went towards travel. So when you turned 18, I mean, how did you make the transition happen? Like, where did you first go to?
The first trip that we did and that really inspired me to want to see more places, first in the surrounding area of Europe where I was based at that time, was a family trip to Rome, actually, which is just a 1.5, 2 hour flight from Vienna. And that just really opened my eyes that there's so much also close by that I can see without having to, cross an ocean or something like that. And that was really like the stepping stone for me to go out even just to a neighboring country and see more.
And I can only imagine, especially because like Rome, it's so, big and grand and there's just so much history there.
History, yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of want to know, I mean, you're on this trip and like you said, it inspired you, but like what exactly about Rome that really kind of took your breath away and made you want to see even more?
Mainly the fact that it is so different from Vienna, even though, as I said earlier, it's so close by. It just feels a lot more, I guess you could say, exotic. The architecture is so different, the whole Italian culture, the people, the language, and also people's friendliness. So all of these things kind of factored into me being like, wow, there's so much that I don't know of that is so close to where I live that is accessible to me. Because, of course, going somewhere to Indonesia, for example, which is many, many more hours by plane, seems like a scary step to take at first. But that just opened my eyes that there's something that is much closer and easier to access that I can make by myself while I'm so young.
And that's what I love about Europe. And I think that's something I feel like most Europeans take advantage of, is the fact that you have so many countries nearby. And like you said, you can go somewhere for like an hour and a half trip or even less and completely be in a completely different place, which is amazing. So,
Yeah, literally.
yeah.
I mean, one time I did a road trip through Europe with a friend, and we went from one spot to the next. And within a day, we crossed literally 4 countries. Like, in how many other regions of the world can you actually do that? It was quite eye
Yeah,
opening.
I wish you could do that here in America. I mean, here in America, I mean, it's diverse in terms of the landscapes and stuff, but in terms of like, culture,
For sure, for sure.
it's not that much different. I mean, there's a few differences, but not as drastic as going from one country to another in Europe.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like you drive 8 hours, you start in Texas, and 8 hours later, you're still in Texas, for example.
Exactly. So like you said, you were inspired by Rome and you wanted to see more, but that was a family trip. So what was like your first kind of solo trip that you were like, okay, I've seen Rome, but now I want to see more.
It was also a trip to Italy, of course, since it's so close as well. I went to Florence. I think it was really just like 2 weeks later. It was really instant. Like, I went to Rome and I was hooked immediately, and I knew that I had to book a trip straight away after we returned. And then I went to Florence and Pisa because the Leaning Tower had been on my list for the longest time, as you can imagine. So I did that, and I pretty much never really stopped since. So along the way, I managed to also make it my profession in a sense. So that surely helped.
So that was when you went to Florence. Is that when you kind of started to dabble into like photography?
I've been into photography since probably 7, 8 years or something like that. So it's been a while, and I've been traveling for about 5 years now. Yeah, February of 5 years ago was when Rome happened. So I'm saying that so dramatically, when Rome happened, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, when Rome happened. But that's what I'm just like very kind of curious about, because you were so young and you had already dabbled into photography a little bit. So what did you do exactly to kind of help it become more of an actual profession rather than just a hobby?
The biggest thing, really, and that would be my biggest recommendation for everyone, would be to get into editing, because photography is one thing and you can take great photos straight out of your camera, but what really makes your photos stand out is always the way that you edit them. I mean, you can do a lot in camera, but really sitting on your computer, trying to get through Lightroom, Photoshop, these are the programs that I mainly use. And really trying to figure out your own style. That is what really propelled me into the right direction professionally.
So yeah, I feel like that's very true, because you look at all these like influencers and photographers and everything. They have a unique style to the point where they even sell like their presets. So I guess you've really developed a beautiful editing style, which I truly admire. So how were you able to kind of take that, like you found your editing style, and then I mean, what did you do to kind of reach out to like brands or hotels or and whatnot in order to get those kind of jobs?
So the first step, and I guess mindset behind it also, was that I did not start it to gain anything out from it. I really just did it because I loved it. I have an artistic background, so creating anything that has to do with aesthetics and something that is pleasing to the eye has always been a big passion of mine. So I guess you could say I was kind of obsessed with it. Meanwhile, I think a lot of people start with the aim to, get brand partnerships and make a living out of it. And that's perfectly fine, because I understand the motivation behind it. I mean, everyone kind of wants to live out their freedom while doing what they're passionate about. But I think a very important thing is that you don't feel the pressure, like outside pressure, so that you really just do what you like. And that is the most straightforward way, I guess, to find your own style and find what you really want to stand for, instead of feeling like you need to fit into this certain box or certain style. I mean, now when I go through Instagram, for example, I feel like most photos look the same because everyone tries to fit that certain look, to look like, I don't know, let's call it an influencer or Instagrammer or what so not. So my number one tip would really be to just follow what you're passionate about in the first place without feeling like you need to be something or be someone.
I honestly love that because I feel like I've heard that a lot, that it shouldn't be so much about like, these deals that you get or the money you make, but it really has to be something from within and figuring out what it is that you really want to put out there in the world. And when you put that out, then that's when you kind of start attracting, those things, like you said, like those deals or the success or whatever it is you want to call it. And but it's obviously just kind of really fighting that internal struggle within yourself and figuring out what you want to do and put out. So I think that's definitely very powerful and very important to know. So what do you think kind of helped you kind of find your aesthetic? Do you think it was just kind of like through several like weeks or months of practice? Did you have to do kind of a lot of soul searching? What do you think helped you get to that point?
What I think helped me most was to really just obsessively trying to figure out all the settings that I could possibly use and everything that I could alter in Lightroom, for example, because, when you know all the tools you have available, you are going to be much, much better at picking what you like best. And that's when, like, talking about the technical part, that is when you will figure out your own personal style. I think when everyone is starting out, you have this phase of just doing one picture that is overexposed, one that might be underexposed, one that has too much contrast. But eventually, once you try and try and try and figure out what you like best, that's when you find your lane, or so to say.
Yeah, it's just a matter of like kind of playing around. So, I mean,
exactly, yeah.
So you did this for a while, and then, when would you say was kind of the turning point where you had found your aesthetic, you had kind of found your voice through your photography? What was the one trip that kind of changed it to making photography like your full-on profession? Where did you go?
So the main thing for me was really to put out as much as I could, to be as present, as interactive as I possibly could be on social media, and always trying to really put out my best. And I guess that's easier to say than it is to do it. Of course, it is a lot of pressure because you feel like you need to put something out there every other day, like at least every 2 days, or even better, every day, or even twice a day. But then having to put out only the best of the best that you can just puts on a lot of pressure. But that was really when it started to take off for me, when I was as active as I could and was also trying to push myself. I mean, that was like the number one thing that I had on my mind the whole time, to become better, to learn more about editing, about photography, and also to be active, because your work can be the best possible, but if you do not have the courage to put it out there, then no one is going to notice, and you're also not going to get any deals, you're not going to make any connections, and so on. So it's, I guess, a good balance about of trying to be a little bit of a perfectionist, but also not too much that it hinders you to put your content out into the internet.
Like you said, you had to really kind of constantly put yourself out there and, be consistent and be more of like a perfectionist. But you've been able to travel, but you still have always been based out of Austria, correct?
Yes, more or less. I mean, last year I was in Austria for combined 3 weeks, maybe. So I guess that still counts as being based there.
But then I feel like over the last few years, you've really kind of made it into a way that now you're kind of more so like on the road traveling than you are at home.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, now during Corona times, it's been a little different, like the tables have turned, but overall, yes, definitely. And that is, I think, the hardest part, about the whole travel blogging thing, that you need to fit the travel part, where you, in a sense, you create the content while you're traveling. I mean, other bloggers, fashion bloggers, lifestyle bloggers don't have to do that, but you also want to fulfill your own need to explore, to meet new people and see new places. But at the same time, you also need to fit in working into your schedule. And like right now, being at home, I work basically 24/7, and it really makes me wonder how it is even possible to work and travel at the same time. Like trying to put these two very demanding things into a day can be really, really challenging.
No, I agree. And it's also trying to kind of find that balance. Like you said, like, you're working all day, but then also you want to like meet your own personal needs. And then like what you do, it relies so much on like putting, content out there. So it's just kind of like, where do you find that kind of balance? But before the corona, like you said, you were constantly traveling. I mean, how many months out of the year would you say that you'd be constantly out of Austria?
Well, last year, really, it was 11 months of the year. And by the end, I was also really, really exhausted and felt like I needed a break.
So maybe these few months at home, have been good in a sense to have a little bit of a break. So being like a travel photographer, where are some places that you've been that you really felt was just kind of easy as a solo female traveler doing photography? Where are some of the easiest, but also like the best places you've been?
So if we take all of these things into account, like photography and traveling solo as a woman, my top countries, I think, are all in Southeast Asia for that matter. In Indonesia, definitely, like the people are so nice and welcoming. It is a beautiful, stunning country with so many places to explore it. And Thailand is also really easy to travel to. And then I also really loved Nepal, felt very safe. But I mean, safety is always, I guess, up to anyone's own standards. My like the countries that I think are the most interesting culturally are mostly in the Middle Eastern or Mediterranean area, and also Southern and Eastern Africa. So it really depends on your own taste, I guess. But what I would recommend for people to start off with would be somewhere in Southeast Asia, like Thailand or Indonesia.
Yeah, no, those places I've always felt like super safe because, like, I used to live in Southeast Asia for a while, and yeah, there's just something about it where I just feel like at peace. And like you said, the people are just so friendly. So especially as a solo female, it's definitely, up there. But I know you've been to some places that are probably a little bit more difficult to travel through, especially as a solo female. So what would you say are some of those countries that would you say was a bit more difficult?
So out of the almost 60 countries, really the most difficult one, and I didn't even do that solo. I did that with another girlfriend, Alexandra. She's the wayfarer. She also has amazing photos, is currently living in Bali, and she's just an overall amazing person. We went to China doing the Trans-Siberian, starting in Russia, over Mongolia, and then ending in Beijing. And from there, we traveled around the country for a month, and it was hands down the most difficult country that I've ever traveled to.
Yeah, I actually follow her as well. And I watched your guys' stories when you did the Trans-Siberian. So I kind of had a feeling that might be the answer. But I mean, but I wanted to see if I'd be right. But yeah, but what about it would you say made it more difficult for both of you women? Like, even though, because it seems like you guys had everything planned out, you had planned it out for months, you kind of knew where you were going to stop and do, but what just kind of took a turn and made it more difficult?
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about it because, we were pretty prepared. Like, we had the whole itinerary figured out. Of course, you need to apply for the visas in advance and all of those kind of things. On the paper, you would think, we're prepared, we got this. And I had read before that it was difficult. So mentally, I was already preparing, like, okay, this might not be a very pleasant trip, and that's okay. But yeah, it was mainly really the discrimination against foreigners in general that I felt. And that also kind of touches down on the topic of being a mixed race traveler. China is not the most, like, I mean, you can't just put it all in a general category, but overall, unfortunately, yeah, they're very closed off to foreigners, and their whole system is very much just not made for people coming from the outside. Anything from trying to withdraw money at an ATM where you go to 10 different banks just to find one that might be able to um, withdraw money for you. And then, of course, the food, the language barrier. And it's really difficult to explain because I've talked to other people who had been to China before, and I was like, that all sounds like difficult, but doable. But in the end, it was really so much more difficult than I ever could have imagined.
I watched your guys' story, and I think what made it more difficult is that because even though you had, everything planned out, the best way you could, just about, everything that could have gone wrong kind of did. And you couldn't really follow your plan. So it's just, I felt like almost every day something didn't go to plan, and you had to like constantly think of like a new idea or a new way to do something. And the fact that you had to do it in a place where, English isn't normally spoken. It didn't seem like many people spoke your language. So when you wanted help, it was difficult to get help.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also funny you say that you could even tell it from our stories, which is interesting because on stories we shared like maybe, I don't know, 5% of the struggles that were really there, because it was just never going in a straight line. It was always getting up to some obstacle and then trying to find your way around it. And in any foreign country, for example, you go to the train station and you cannot find the place your train is departing from. And in any country, people usually try to help you if you ask them, where is this train departing from, or whatever question it might be. But in China, they will usually just look at you and ignore you. And it's just this constant feeling of not belonging and feeling like you're not welcomed and you're not wanted there, really, which also makes it really draining. But what adds to it, we did like 30 days of it. So I guess if you're there for a week, it's okay.
30 days. I mean, I'm sure by the 30th day, I'm sure you were just already craving for some familiarity, whether it's someone speaks the same language or you just know where you're going, you just want something like familiar. But I feel like the one thing I really resonated with your guys' story, because I've been through that as well, especially when I was kind of living in Turkey, where just everything was going wrong all the time, and you would try to get help and it wasn't happening. So just like seeing that, like I could just feel it. I was just like, not to maybe to the extent of traveling around China, but I could understand that feeling where you're like, you have all these plans and it's not going well and you can't get help. And it's just like, feel stuck. So if anything, I was just like, oh, like I feel that, like, I totally understand that kind of feeling.
Yeah, on one hand, I'm sorry that you can't even relate to that feeling, but also I'm glad, because a lot of people, when you tell them what happened or how you felt, they kind of try to play it down and are just like, oh, these countries are just different. But it's, yeah, it's another thing.
It's another thing when you experience it, because it's like, yes, you understand it's a different culture, it's a different way of life, and people act differently towards, foreigners. But it sometimes feels a bit hurtful because, if someone needed help, you would do that for them. When someone wouldn't do that for you, it just, yeah, it hurts a little bit. It just kind of makes you feel a little bit inferior, whether that's not what they're trying to do at all, but that's just kind of how you feel like in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the main reasons I love traveling is because I love connecting with the people that live in the places that I get to visit, and being able to connect and see their kindness, really. And that was just not really there. So, yeah.
You said that, on this trip when you went to China was where you kind of experienced some discrimination. But, as someone who is mixed race, I mean, was this something that you kind of experienced already quite a bit before, because I remember you did like a post recently where you had been like denied service, or, people kind of are saying things like almost in front of you, if not kind of behind your back, but they're talking about you. So what other experiences have you gone through, and how did you kind of work through that?
So the best or like clearest examples that I have experienced were usually when immigrating into a country, and I don't mean moving there, but just at immigration, when you are the only colored person and you're traveling solo as a woman, so you're already I guess kind of suspicious, especially when you have a skin of color, then you stand out a lot. And then when they ask you all of these questions, why you're here, who you're traveling with, why you're traveling by yourself, and just holding you up for the longest time, while meanwhile someone in front of you, that he was a um, white man, he does not get any of those questions. So you realize very quickly, okay, this is based off of who I am, even though I have an Austrian passport, which is of course very strong, and still questions are being raised. So that is one thing. And then of course, in other countries where you feel like you're not being welcomed at a restaurant, when you ask for a table for one person or even two persons, it depends, of course, and then they just seem like they don't actually want you to come to the restaurant because you don't look like you can afford it, based on I'm assuming your skin color, even though you're wearing nice clean clothes and everything.
What do you do when that happens? I mean, how do you react? I just feel like that's already hurtful enough. So what do you do to kind of push past that?
Yes, it is hurtful indeed, unfortunately, but I tend to just stay calm, because usually I don't realize it at first that that might be the reason for the unfriendliness. I tend to just talk around it and try to ask questions like why you do not want me to be here, or if anything is wrong, did anything happen, or anything like that.
And when you do ask, I mean, what is kind of like the typical response that they give?
Usually not any response really. It's more like a head and handshaking, and just I wish I could show you on video, but it's just this shaking you off kind of and telling you to just leave. And that makes it even more hurtful, because it's like they don't even have the respect to give you any proper reason at all. It's just dehumanizing in a way, I guess.
No, it is. It's like you're there, you want to have like a good experience, a good meal, just because.
Exactly. Like, I was gonna leave my money at your restaurant and you're denying that. So I guess it's your problem, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I've personally never had that happen, but I can only imagine like that kind of feeling when someone like treats you in that way, because it's like you said, you had the money, you were there ready to have a meal and pay, and for their reasoning they just didn't want that. And yeah, I like I said, I can only imagine like the kind of hurt and feeling you must have had in that moment. But luckily, like you have been able to push through and like find like other businesses and other restaurants where you can actually go to and they do welcome you into their business.
Yes, absolutely. Of course. I mean, there's always people that might not be so friendly, but there's 99% of other people who usually are, luckily. So that is the upside of it. And also, it makes you appreciate people's kindness much more. I mean, maybe I'm just trying to find positive things here, but yeah, negative experiences just give you a good contrast to the better ones. So
Yeah, but I think you should be looking for the positive things, like even if it's just something small, it's still having that gratitude, at the end of the day, that not everything is going to be perfect, but at least there are some things that are going well, and people's kindness. So that's definitely something that you should look for. And I know for me, traveling around and living abroad, one of the biggest things that I've always loved about being in a place is people's kindness, and like the people that I meet and surround myself with. I feel like that really does kind of make or break a travel experience.
yes, absolutely. I mean, people make the journey. There's this famous quote that definitely is true, and that you learn to understand once you travel more and more.
But yeah, I'm just really sorry that, those things have had to happen. But so now you've been traveling for, like you said, for 5 years or so. So what do you see for yourself in the future? Like, how do you hope to grow in this profession and also with what you can see in the world?
So I think right now it is very hard, of course, to predict anything that will happen. I think any sense of normality really will only be able to return once there is a vaccine. Otherwise, I think most people will be too scared or worried to really resume travel or resume their plans as they were. But for me, disregarding that, I definitely want to continue traveling for the next couple of years or so, but in a little slower pace than I did last year. That's for sure. But overall, I mean, traveling is my biggest passion, so I want to continue doing that for now.
So when you say like slower pace, like there's a term I think it's called kind of like slow travel or something, where you like spend like a longer period of time in one place. Is that something that you want to do more of, or when you say slow down, do you mean like something else?
I think it is more about the work travel balance, because before I was just not sleeping enough. I was always trying to pack in as many activities in a day, but at the same time also work as much as I could. So for me, it is more about just pausing a few days and maybe not going outside to explore, but focusing on what I have to do work wise. So just finding that balance would be to slow down for me.
And so when you do travel though, how do you travel with kind of your old equipment, especially as a solo female traveler? Like what do you do to kind of properly take care of your things?
Oh yeah, that can be heavy, heavy, very heavy. Yeah, usually by the end of the day, my back hurts a little, and I guess I've kind of gotten used to it. Sometimes I get the comments like, "Wow, you're so strong," and I don't even realize it. Like I don't do any workouts while traveling, but I guess it's really just the equipment that is doing the workouts, I guess. So that can be challenging. I usually just try to put in as much as possible into my backpack. There's all the camera, the tripods, different lenses, maybe even your laptop if you know you're not going to be back until the evening, but you still need to do work on the go. So it's all of these things that sometimes add up to a 10 kilogram or 15 kilogram backpack. And yeah, that goes into your muscles.
Oh my gosh. And you were traveling like this for, like you said, 11 months straight last year.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I try to keep it lighter if I can, but I mean, I'm an overpacker, I will be honest. So for me, it's hard to just say, like, okay, I will just leave my computer here for the day, but I want to be prepared for all kinds of scenarios because, of course, while traveling, you can never be fully sure what will happen that day. So
Wow. So now I see more of why you kind of wanted like a break after. I know you, like you said, you've been doing it for a few years, but yeah, traveling like that, especially so extensively. Yeah, I can only imagine how you must feel at the end. So, I mean, I guess right now we're in this time where, we're still waiting to see what happens with the world, but I know you're exploring more of Austria. So do you have any more kind of trips around your country planned?
For now, I don't. But also the borders within Europe have reopened, luckily. So I will actually go on a trip about next week. I have not booked it yet, but I will go to Cyprus, but it is more work related. So leisure travel, I think, is still a little harder simply because um, you cannot ever be fully sure what is open or what are the restrictions in each country exactly. I feel like it's not fully transparent. So that is kind of hindering me from just booking a trip for fun to wherever I want to go. So now work goes first.
Someone was telling me the other day how her friend like went from the UK to Croatia, and she's also doing it for like kind of work and stuff, and so that kind of helped her kind of travel and go over to Croatia. So it just kind of seems that, yeah, if traveling is going to be happening, it's going to be more so, like you said, for business rather than leisure right now.
Yeah, I think so. So because in a lot of countries you need a more valid reason than just leisure. But I think overall in Europe it is still, I mean, if you're a European citizen trying to travel within Europe, then you're going to have a much easier time than in the rest of the world right now. That is for sure. But overall, yeah, it's really interesting to see how everything is evolving because I feel like things are changing every other day, every other week, and you never know where it's going next. So I guess we will see and keep following everything that the internet is telling us.
Exactly. So I'm going to be doing the same. I saw that I think like Spain is supposed to open to international people July 1st or something. But like you said, I would rather just kind of maybe wait a little bit and make sure that everything is like running smoothly, that there's no hiccups, as these borders open before making a flight, since I am in the US right now and it's a longer flight,
Yeah.
a longer trip to get somewhere. So it's just,
Yeah, maybe you board the plane and by the end of the flight, it's like, oh, nope, we closed our borders again. Please return to your home country. I mean, that's probably not going to happen.
yeah. So, like I said, we'll see for the time being. But I guess I just want to ask you because, you're young and you've already established like your profession in photography and you've traveled for so many years. For someone who kind of wants to follow in your footsteps and live this life of constantly traveling and working remotely, what advice would you give them?
So, my biggest advice, I think, for everyone that wants to be an entrepreneur, to work for themselves, and also have to deal with very hectic schedules is work on your own self discipline and on your organizational skills, because that for me has really been the biggest challenge, of course, because you need to really put in the energy every single day. And even though that might be an easier thing to create when you have the motivation, when you're really passionate about what you're doing, but really the organizational part is very challenging, because in most workplaces you get a set like a set of things that you have to do, but when you work by yourself you got to figure everything out by yourself. And I think whichever direction you're trying to go to, that is really the main thing that you have to bring into your newfound business. And of course, as I was saying earlier, try to find a balance between perfectionism and the courage to put things out there without them being perfect, so that you're still as good as you can, but putting things out regularly.
That's very important for anyone, like you said, who wants to have their own business, but also too who wants to extensively travel alongside their business. Because if you want to enjoy life, you need to be able to organize your work. If you want to do the work, you need to be able to also have some time to enjoy life. So no, I think those are very true words. And do you have any funny stories? I want to kind of finish on a light note. Do you have any like funny story from?
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Funny stories. It's always hard to pick that off the top of my brain. Funny stories. Yeah. So there's this one thing that just kind of popped up in my head right now. It is in Bali actually, and I was trying to take a photo with a different perspective of a waterfall, and I was just talking to a group of people while I was preparing to take the photo. And 5 seconds later, I somehow found myself um, literally as deep as my neck into the pool of that waterfall, just carrying around my tripod and my camera and looking back to the people that I just talked to and looking forward and just hoping that I would not fall into the water completely with all my camera equipment and everything on me. And that was one of those moments where you're like, wow, life is so crazy. And I really, really love traveling, but also thinking like, what am I doing? This is completely ridiculous. So that was one very entertaining moment for myself and the people that I had just talked to, but everything ended up working out just fine. So that's great. But yeah, it's a bunch of stories and memories like that where you're just like, how did I just get into this? Like, this would never happen if I would have just decided to stay at home. So I guess moral of the story, go out, go travel when things are more normal again.
I just have to say, I feel like that perfectly embodies everything you do. You're a traveler, you're a photographer, you love adventure. So there you are going in the water with your camera, with new people you met.
I should just make that my Instagram bio description. So I'm the girl who does really stupid things sometimes, but they're worth it.
Yes, exactly. No, but I love that story. And I feel like that embodies you as who you are as a person, that you are that determined to have an experience or to get a photo. Like, you will do whatever it takes. And I think,
yeah, you gotta go the extra mile. That's for sure. My mom would not be happy about me doing this, but you gotta do what you gotta do. So
I think that is the perfect way to just, to finish off today's episode. So again, thank you so much. And
I'm glad that we managed to finish off on a little lighter note.
Exactly. So we'll definitely do this again soon. And yeah, I hope to talk with you again really soon.
Thank you so much for the great conversation. And I hope to catch you another time. Maybe we can even meet up in person. That would be great.
Definitely.
For more information on travel and life abroad, go to VentureEtte.com. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know by leaving a review. And be sure to follow me at VentureEtte on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Safe travels, and until next time.